The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Alberta Canola Producers Commission, SAS Canola, and Manitoba Canola Growers.
Welcome to Real Agriculture's Canola School series. I'm Kara Oosterhuis. Today I'm here with Shawn Senko, who's an agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada. Today we're standing in a very windy plot trial here in southern Saskatchewan, and we're talking about harvesting canola crops that are at variable stages, as farmers across the prairies are dealing with this very situation right now. Shawn, what can you tell me about some of the decisions that producers are currently looking at making?
Well, typically when it comes to swathing, we always talk about, the majority of the field at 60 to 70% seed color change, and that's when you tend to see that maximum yield you're going to get out of the plant, right? When we look at most of the trial results from straight cutting versus 60 to 70% seed color change, there isn't a big difference in yield, so you're getting that maximum amount. But on a year like this, like I said, we talk about majority of the field. That typically is 90% of the field, where in this case it might only be 60% of the field, and you've got another 30-40% that is nowhere near that. So it might be on a year like this, your timing, you may want to wait for some of those later parts of the field to fill in, as cutting canola in that 30 to 40% can be 10% or more yield loss versus the 60 to 70%. So it really comes down to how much of that field is variable and later versus how much is ready to go. So you really want to try and base your timing on the latest part of the field to come in. But it'll depend on a lot of it logistics and what timing of the year and what you need to get done. But you just have to be aware of, if you're cutting that canola early, you will be losing some yield.
Okay, and are there any numbers on yield loss if you're waiting too long for these lower parts of the crops to catch up?
Yeah, that's exactly and there's a lot of varieties that are more geared to late swathing, straight cutting now. So if you've got something like that in your field, a lot of times you can get 90% or more and still have very little shatter loss. So it really depends on the variety you've got and just watching that field. If you're starting to see that variety dry down, if you walk in there and you'll give it a bat with your hand and you're starting to see some shelling, you probably don't want to be waiting for the rest of the field, as the losses from that more ripe area could add up to more than the actual losses in the not mature area. And it's really, there's no good answer to it. It's going to vary from field to field, but just getting out there and looking is the main thing.
So if producers are looking at just straight cutting their crops and their crop is very variable, why is it important that they don't just go over it with a desiccant if it's not ready?
Well, a big part, if you're too early, it's just like swathing too early. You can lose yield. But another one is we've got our Keep It Clean campaign going on right now, and just residue limits we don't want to be above. So for something like glyphosate, you have to be below that 30% seed moisture, which doesn't make a lot of correlation to producers when they walk into a field looking for 30% seed moisture. You actually can't measure that, but it tends to be in that about 50% seed color change, 50 to 60. And we tend to say, swathing 60 to 70%. So I say the time you should be applying glyphosate is really close to the time you'd be swathing the crop, to be sure you're not too early and getting any residue in the seed. There's other products like, heat as well. That is close to that 80% brown seed, I believe, is what the current recommendation is. And then something like, a desiccant like Reglone is even later in that 90+% brown seed.
So can you talk a bit about why, on a global scale, it's important to watch these residue limits?
Yeah, it's getting more and more precise, the testing for these limits. So there are countries testing for it. Our buyers are testing. So we want to make sure that we're not keep doing anything off-label and causing that residue in the seed, as it can cause us lost markets. Yeah, and we want to make sure that we keep all the markets we can as we're an exporting country. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add about harvest decisions, especially, like I said, in a variable crop?
Yeah, it's much like I spoke with swathing. When it comes to the desiccating, you have to really get out there and check all the areas of the field. As this year, it's not only a few percentage of the field that's green. It's a lot of it is 30, 40. Even I've seen half and half the field. So you got to really take a good walk through that field to assess what you're at for timing.